For me, I didn't see a white light. I didn't get pulled into a white light. I was just instantly on the other side. And so we ended up going to this room, this kind of white room high up in the galaxy. Then my guides were gathered around this white kind of boardroom table. And I remember they rolled out what looked like blueprints. Before I came into this lifetime, I created that entire blueprint with my guides and my counsel. My soul was like, I want to learn this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this. And we create those things, and they kind of counsel us on, yes, definitely take on this experience. Maybe your experience is moving through grief or abundance. It could be any one of those. And they may counsel you on, your last lifetime was very challenging in grief. You might not be ready to take on grief again in this lifetime. So what if we save that for another time? There's a collaborative effort in our lifetime design for what we're going to do. Can you tell me about the day of your near-death experience? Yeah, so it was during a routine surgery. I had been hemorrhaging a lot from my monthly cycles, and so we needed to do a pretty simple surgery to help me out at that point. And so we just kind of went into it. Everything was all good and normal. And when they put me under, like I said, I was so excited. For me, I didn't see a white light. I didn't get pulled into a white light. I was just instantly on the other side. And I knew instantly where I was. It wasn't like, where am I? What's happening? It was like I knew exactly where I was. And I landed on the grass, bare feet, and the grass was like the most beautiful green grass. I could zoom in on the details of the grass if I wanted to, just with my eyes. I could see the details in it. I could feel it fully. I remember kind of walking up this sort of hill, and I came upon this kind of like a barbecue picnic scene. And I remember the sky was the most beautiful blue. It was just like that summer blue. Everything was so vibrant. When I came upon this barbecue picnic kind of thing, I realized it was all different people that I knew from this lifetime and lifetimes before. My grandmother was there, and she kind of welcomed me into it. I had the most amazing reunions with people, and it felt like there was no rushing it, but there were lots of them. I could see them coming forward, and I remember giving each of them hugs. These hugs were like the most beautiful reunions. I always say the hug was like when you have a little toddler who throws themselves in your arms because, in that moment, you are the best thing in the world to them. The hugs felt like that. Each one was so full of divine energy. I spent what felt like hours talking to them and reminiscing, asking, what have you been up to? What are you doing now? After I spent a long time there, my grandmother said it was time to move on. We ended up going to this room, a kind of white room high up in the galaxies, where the galaxies or the universe are creating themselves. It was this white room, and outside the windows I could see galaxies and stars, but also, again, where the universe is still creating itself. It was really far away. My guides were gathered around this white kind of boardroom table, and I remember them rolling out what looked like blueprints. They looked like legit architecture blueprints, but it was my life. Down the center of this blueprint was this kind of pulsing, iridescent light moving back and forth. I knew that meant I was still alive. Here I was, sitting there with my guides or standing there with them, and we did a life review of everything in my life up until that very moment. I was like, okay, cool. But it wasn't until that moment when we got to where we were that they asked, now at this point, would you like to stay here or do you want to go back to Earth? And I remember thinking, oh well, I want to go back to Earth. It didn't dawn on me that it just simply was. And so they were like, you don't have to. And, are you sure you want to go back? I was like, yeah, I do want to go back. I want to go back for my family, and I've accomplished things and I'd like to continue. And, then when I decided that I wanted to go back, what was interesting is I then got to see my higher self. My higher self, which was, it's hard to explain, but my higher self looked like me. I could see her for that reference standing in front of me looking at me, but I could also be her, feeling like me, looking at me. So, I was both. It all felt completely normal. It felt completely normal to be in conversation with me, right? My higher version of everything that I am. When I saw and felt the absolute beauty that my higher self saw in a lifetime, I understood how valuable our lifetimes are, with everything that we go through in them. There is so much value on the soul level. And when I felt that it was just like, yeah, of course I want to go back. I don't want to lose what I've started here. And so then again they asked, are you sure you want to stay? Or do you want to go back to Earth? Or do you want to stay here? They explained that if I was going to stay, it would be as simple as kind of flipping a switch, and I would just have a heart attack on the table. At no point was I like, no, 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 don't do that. There was no fear. It was as if I had all the time in the world to decide, but I also just knew within my whole being that, no, I want to go back. What was interesting is that at that point, they showed me the rest of my blueprint. I can't tell because in my memory I can't see how long of my blueprint how much we went through. Like, was it 12 inches worth on this paper? Was it 8 inches? I know that the last remaining part looked about 6 or 8 inches, but I don't know what to compare it to because I don't have that memory kept. I can't determine how long I have left, but in what was remaining I was able to. They said I could switch things around if I wanted. This was so neat because I had seen and I had heard spirits talk about how we create our destiny and we create our soul blueprint before we come in. Then it's our free will that dictates how we maneuver that. And so, there I was. I was able to pull out some of these juncture points or destiny points, and they kind of looked like fuses in a fuse box. I pulled the first one out. I remember it represented chronic health issues because I had a ton of chronic health issues. I would be the one that would get sick first. I would get the sickest of anything that was out there. I just always got sick. When I pulled it out, they were like, yeah, you can take it out and replace it. You can choose what you want to create in this part of your life now. I remember thinking, it's that easy? I just pull out the fuse and replace it? And they were like, yeah. As I was putting in one that had better health, I remember thinking, yeah, okay, we'll see, because I was so used to being chronically ill. I put that new fuse in, and then they said, you will remember the first one, but you won't remember the other ones until they happen, right? So, you can change out the others. You're not going to have conscious memory of what they are, but you will remember this first one, so that it's real to you. Then, after that, my grandmother brought me back, and this whole part happened at the same time. After that, I remember hearing the nurse in the recovery room say, Janet, are you awake? My surgery. I think it was like under an hour, and my whole experience felt like an entire day, right? And so she's like, Ginette, are you awake? Within these same moments, I felt my spirit go back into my body. I still had my eyes closed, and I could still feel my grandmother with me in spirit. But I heard my higher self speak through me. I've had surgeries before, and I am not coherent after surgery. Everything is funny. The room is bouncing to me. I'm slurring my words, and I don't make sense. As soon as I popped in, my higher self said to the nurse with clarity, I need you to write something down. I need you to write down these 4 things. They're very important, and I need you to fold up the paper and put it in my hand. She said, okay, what is it you want to say? I gave her these 4 kind of word statements that really wouldn't make sense to anybody else. They were, Great Baba, I have it up here, tree roots, time to entwine, and I went far. To anybody else this might be like, okay, great. But what they were was these key words that would unlock the whole memory of everything. So, she folded it up. She was so sweet. She stopped what she was doing to write down what I said, folded it up, and put it in my hand. I remember I held on to it like this. Then, when they wheeled me into recovery, my mum was there. I gave her the paper and said, you cannot lose this paper. Then they gave me pain meds and everything, and I was out for a bit. A couple of days later, once I was off, any kind of pain med spirit was like, it's time for you to remember. Now, it's not that I didn't know anything happened, because I remember once I came out of it, I was absolutely enamored by everything on this planet. I was like, oh my gosh, how amazing is that we have these blankets, and these blankets keep us warm. And oh my gosh, this TV, like we've created TVs. It was as if I was seeing it with fresh eyes, the simplicity of the things we have on the planet. And so anyways, after a few days when I read those words again, the entirety just like came right back into my mind, all the details. I remember I was recuperating at my parents' house at that point, and I told them, I went out into the backyard. I was like, I need to tell you all a story. I need to tell you what happened. My mom actually took a snapshot of that moment of me telling them my story for the very first time. It was really interesting and absolutely transforming. One of the things that I agreed to with my guides when I was on the other side was that if I was going to come back, I would make a point of sharing my story, speaking up about it, and discussing what I've learned from Spirit to help others learn. It's not to convince anyone of anything. It's just to help people learn and see what resonates with them. It was a big changing point for me because it was soon after that I created my podcast. We created Avalon Spirit and YouTube pages. It was just the starting point of something more. It was very transformative, but at the same time, as much as it was amazing and life-changing, my perspective has not been the same since. It's just different. I see suffering differently. It brought so much magic into my life to literally be there. Even though I did a lot of mediumship before, there was also this year or so of acclimating back to human life and the density here after being in that energy on the other side. The energy there is just pure bliss and harmony. It's not bliss in excess like we think on this planet. When we think of bliss, we think of just absolute bliss, nothing better. It's almost excessive. There, it's like balance. Everything is in harmony. When you come to this planet after remembering that, it's very hard to be here in the density and the emotions and the sadness and the suffering. It took me a little while to really wrap my head around having had that experience and how to be human again, because it also taught me the perspective of the spirit and the soul. That perspective is of balance and harmony. So when we agree to come to this planet and have experiences, we're looking at it from that perspective and from what we gain from it. But then, the human perspective here is the one that has to take on the density and the suffering and the whatever. So it took me a little while to kind of find where those two fit into my world now, after having had such an undeniable experience. Thank you so much for sharing all that, and I have so many more questions for you. What an interesting experience. I think the first question I'd love to start with is, you mentioned that you see suffering differently. How so? Yeah, so this is so delicate, right? It is so delicate because we can't just put a blanket statement on suffering and have that be okay. What I mean by that is to say, like, everything happens for a reason, so therefore don't be so sad, right? That's kind of what it makes us feel, right? If everything happens for a reason, then we should just believe that everything happens for a reason. Then okay, this suffering I'm going through, whether it's the loss of somebody or an illness you're experiencing or whatever it might be, should be okay. But there is a very human aspect to the experience of suffering, right? Like, it is very human to experience suffering because we live on a planet that has such polarity and duality, right? To know the light, we need to know the dark. This helps us appreciate the light more. But at the same time, where it changed my perspective on suffering is when we know that we need to bring more light into those moments of suffering. And that's a really hard thing to do. Again, I don't say that lightly, as if it's easy, but that's where we can kind of pull some power. It is in the moments of suffering, our greatest moments, where can we bring in that light to change the perspective of that suffering? And again, that is not a blanket statement or an easy thing. This past summer, I had an opportunity to experience some great suffering. And I remember in some of those moments I had to dig so deep, to see how I could find light in this. How could I possibly see light in this with everything I've experienced? For me, it was reflecting on a time in which I suffered more, right? In this case, for me, it was physical suffering. I was thinking, okay, so this is awful. This is absolutely awful. What would be worse? In that moment, I realized, well, when I was in labor, that was way worse than this. So I was technically grateful right now that I wasn't in that experience of labor. Pulling the light into that darkness helped shift my perspective of suffering in that moment to make it more tolerable, to be able to shift it. That's the part where we have the power. It's not always easy, absolutely. But when we can bring that in, we can see that through suffering we get to learn so much. Through the healing from the suffering, we also get to learn on a soul level how we can be more resilient, how we can grow, and how we can release the attachments to maybe even other things that keep us in that energy of suffering. How you say, I had the opportunity to experience suffering. That's something I'm going to have to say to myself now too. What an interesting perspective. Can you tell me more about the idea of a council? You said that it was your council who showed you your blueprint. Who is that? So, we all have a council of spirit guides, right? I call it a council. I think people would have lots of names for it, but we definitely have more than just one spirit guide. We have several different ones that do different things for us. Some of them are lifetime guides. Some come in at certain times in our lives to help us through an event, a situation, or something like that. And, for me, they all came forward and presented themselves at this table to do my life review. It's kind of like the way I could explain it if you were in university and say you were writing your thesis or something. You sit at the boardroom table with all your professors who are putting in input and reviewing what you've produced. It's kind of like we were reviewing what I'd produced in my life, but none of it was with judgment. So when we think of that situation and we think of university professors reviewing our thesis, we think judgment. But on the other side, there was no judgment. It was all supportive energies of the good and the bad, right? Like I've done things in my life I'm not proud of. I've done things in my life I'm so proud of, and everything in between, right? We all have, because that's part of being human. And when you do your life review with your guides or your counsel, they are helping you to understand the whys and the actions behind what happened, good, bad, or anything in between. And so, it's actually a really beautiful, supportive process. So even for people that you know are listening and maybe have had, a very challenging life and maybe they have a lot of shame, regret, or guilt, that moment in your life review is so supportive from spirit. I mean, you can't get away from it. You're going to experience all the things and see them, but it's not in a place of hateful judgment like I think sometimes old traditions or old religions like to state. It's not that. It's very supportive. That's awesome. What did your blueprint say? Was it kind of like a step-by-step plan for your life? Was it something that you planned yourself before you came to Earth? What exactly was on there? Yeah. So, it didn't have words. It looked a little bit more like, if you ever ride like the subway or the train or SkyTrain or whatever, and you look at the map, it has like a central line, and then it has these like deviation points. It kind of sort of looked like that. Okay, it kind of looked like that, and that's the closest I could explain it. Each of those points represents like what I call a destiny point, something that your soul wishes to learn in this lifetime. So before I came into this lifetime, I created that entire blueprint with my guides and my counsel. We stood at that same table. My soul was like, I want to learn this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this. And they were like, okay, we're going to put in a near-death experience somewhere around here. And I'm like, yeah, high five. Sounds great. Let's do it. We create those things and they kind of counsel us on, yes, definitely take on this experience. Maybe your experience is moving through grief, I don't know, or abundance. It could be any one of those. They may counsel you on the idea that your last lifetime was very challenging in grief. You might not be ready to take on grief again in this lifetime. So what if we save that for another time? Then you're like, okay, so I won't do that. There's a collaborative effort in our lifetime design for what we're going to do. That's why after we complete the lifetime, we review it with them and go over what worked and what didn't. That's where we decide what we want to bring into the next lifetime, right? So if we find there was, say, addictions, that was a thing that just you couldn't move through it in this lifetime. Oftentimes people will bring that into the next lifetime to be able to transcend it in some form. That's so interesting. And I'm very interested in the idea of past and future lives. You mentioned that you saw people from your past lives at the picnic. Do you remember? Did you remember your past lives in that moment? Did they come flooding back to you? So, that's a great question. I already have memory of some of my past lives that I've picked up over the years at different points where it's been valuable for me to know it. So I have a recollection of several. In that moment, though, on the other side, I knew exactly where I knew them from. But for me to pinpoint exactly who, from what lifetime, I couldn't tell you. But I knew each and every one of them. So it's kind of like if you had a party and you had a whole bunch of different friends come by from different friend groups, and different groups that you're part of. It's a mix-mash of people, but you know each and every one of them. It's like that feeling. But I couldn't tell you exactly who from where because it was more energetic. And I had somebody ask me one time what they looked like. Like, did they look like people? Did they look like orbs? Did they look like energy? They looked like all three at the same time. And again, that doesn't make sense to our human mind. But in my memory, I can see them as energy. You can see them as an orb. I can see them as the person. But it's all one and the same. So, I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. But to answer your question, like, yes, I knew they were from past lives, but I couldn't tell you which ones. Okay. But the ones from this lifetime I could, right? Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I'm wondering about when you pulled out the chronic health issues from your blueprint. Did that then get better since? Yeah, so that's really interesting. That one, it took me about a year to actually believe that it was legitimate, right? Because like I said, when I put it in, I'm like, okay, we'll see. And I was so surprised to see that I wasn't getting sick all the time. Does that mean I never catch a cold now or something? I do. But like my whole family can get sick, and being a mum, I can take care of everybody and not end up sick. Whereas before, if anyone got sick, I knew I would have it. Like, here we go. Great. Like, or if there's something going around, say around the hockey team or dance team or whatever, I would always pick it up, and I don't. So my resilience now is actually really interesting to see. It's very, very different than it was before. And I love that. And it took me, like I said, it took me that year to really understand that I'm in a different energy now than I was before. But I do want to echo, that doesn't mean that I can't get sick, right? Because part of my suffering this past summer was, I had one more surgery which apparently was in my blueprint that I had put in there. But I ended up getting an infection after that, and then my liver shut down. It was a series of events, based on also free will choices, which is a whole other story. I had to experience this suffering, and it was really hard for me because at first I was like, I thought we agreed. I thought I took it out that I would have no more chronic suffering. And my guides were very clear. They're like, this isn't chronic suffering. This is suffering based on free will choices. They had encouraged me to get the surgery a year before, and I said, no, I'm too busy. I want to do this, this, and this, which would deplete my body energy. And so again, it was this neat review of what I had changed in my blueprint, understanding it more, and realizing even through this experience of suffering and infections this summer, how resilient my body is anyway. And so it's just been this, like when I say opportunity for suffering, it's not said lightly in an easy way, but it's said in a way of like when we hold that perspective, we really can glean so much more from the experience. Like we can see beyond just the suffering and start to understand the why or what it's connected to. I feel like personally, it's so hard sometimes to find that. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's like that for everyone. You said something that was, really interesting about free will. So if we are planning our lives before we come, how does free will come into that if it's something we've already determined ahead of time? Yeah, that's a great question. So, the blueprint is your base blueprint for your life, right? But your free will gets to dictate how you maneuver that blueprint, right? So you're going to come across these destiny pieces, these chunks that you desire to learn, these lessons, right? But you have the opportunity, with your free will, to choose the way in which you're going to approach that, right? So if I use this past summer as an example, my first surgery was to kind of lessen the hemorrhaging, right? My second surgery that I had this past summer was to actually just remove my uterus because of other things we've done. It just was time. Long story short, that was very peaceful for me. Although that was in my path, and I had a beautiful experience during that surgery, not an NDE, but a different experience. Although that was in my path, my free will dictated how that would play out. And so my guides, like I said, had suggested, you should really do this destiny point ASAP. But my free will choice was like, hey, no, I'm not going to. I'm actually going to push it off because I have this and this dance thing I really want to do. It's going to take a year, I'll do it after. And they're like, it's going to take a big toll on your body. You really should do this sooner. Again, that's where they're trying to follow my blueprint and align it with what's going on. My choice was, no, I'm going to wait. I can do it. I can push through it. I'm fine. So my free will choices led to me having a much bigger recovery than what it could have been, because it's how I decided to maneuver the blueprint. So we go through those experiences on all kinds of different levels every day, right? Like, Say you're in a job that you don't really like, but it's a stepping stone to your next job. But if you don't recognize you're not happy in it and you want to change it, well then, you could delay that next step by 10 years if your free will is choosing to stay in this job you don't like. Or is your free will choosing to, you know what, this isn't aligning for me? I'm going to find something different now because I'm ready to move on. That's how we get to maneuver that. So, Spirit describes it like the blueprint is a set river. The river meanders as it is. We can't change that. But the free will is you in a boat, and you choose how you're going to move along that river. If you're going to stop here, if you're going to go use all your gas and go back upstream, or if you're going to work with the flow of the river. That's kind of how it plays out. That's great advice. So you had your guides counseling you, suggesting you should do the surgery earlier. What about people who aren't in contact with their guides? Do they get signs or signals too? Signs, symbolisms and signals, they're all around us all the time. Spirit uses them all the time, from number patterns and dream state information to certain animals and meanings in those animals, to songs that pop up on the radio when we're thinking of something, or you overhear a conversation that validates something. Like say, for example, somebody is wanting to, let's just say, get a hysterectomy. I'm not promoting or not promoting this. This is just for the example. Say they're like, I really don't know if this is in my interest. I feel like it might be. Then they're in line at Starbucks and the people in front of them are like, yeah, my sister just got a hysterectomy yesterday. It was the best thing she ever did. And they happen to overhear that in that time frame while they're pondering it, right? The universe has so many ways to put us in different positions to receive signs. The thing is, a lot of people still think it's just coincidence. And so, what I always recommend to people is if you're looking for signs and symbolisms from your guides, ask for them to come in a series of 3, right? So if you're like, please help me, I can't hear you at all. Can you bring this through in signs, but make it happen in 3s? Say, maybe your sign is a ladybug, right? Maybe the first one you see that morning and later that afternoon or the next day, there's a ladybug on your window and you're like, okay, there's one ladybug. The second one could be that someone gives you a card, and on the card, there's a ladybug. You're like, okay, that's 2 ladybugs in like a day and a half. Then maybe the next night you come home and your family is watching a documentary, and there are ladybugs all over the screen on this nature documentary, right? Like, it doesn't always have to be the single ladybug landing on you 3 times. It can come in different ways. And so, you can really communicate to your spirit guides what your sign or symbol is that you really want to hear. Also, again, have them bring it to you in 3s, because then you can start to build that communication. They honestly want nothing more than to communicate with you. It's just that we have to recognize the subtle ways that they do. I kind of got a shiver, like a ladybug is kind of my sign of connection with just a family thing. So that's interesting that you use that example. That's awesome. Have your abilities as a medium changed since your near-death experience? They really kind of skyrocketed, and that was an adjustment as well, to be honest. What I could access, the higher realms I could access, or where I could astral travel to, and the level of consciousness that was coming down for me to interpret was a lot, right? So as amazing as it was also a big shift in consciousness that I needed to learn how to ground and bring into this reality, because, spirit can communicate word for word, like we're communicating right now, but oftentimes they actually just drop sort of like a thought bubble, and in that bubble it's instant, but you could have 3 paragraphs of information in that bubble, right? And so it's about how to interpret what's coming in. As well, I found my capacity for clairvoyance increased a lot after that NDE too. Honestly, I think when you consciously experience the other side like that, and you bring back the memories of it, you can't help but bring back the frequency of it. If you bring back the frequency of it, then you have access to that level of frequency. It's kind of like you can't unknow that frequency, and therefore that frequency starts to come into your world more. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Yeah, it does. I'm so curious about mediumship and clairvoyancy. I guess there wouldn't be a typical session, but kind of what happens when you enter that space for other people and do that work. So, when I tune in first, so you know the person? I'll sit down with the person, and then I will. I always start by closing my eyes. When I close my eyes, I'm kind of shutting out the visual cues in my world, and it allows me to sink in. I kind of sink in because Spirit told me a long time ago that the gateway to anything spirit is through the heart space. So I always kind of sink in and go into my heart. From there, I start to see, when I call in spirit and those of whoever I'm reading for, I start to see these pinpricks of light that kind of look like stars. They start to kind of show themselves, and that's when I can usually count like, oh, there are 7 spirits here, or 3 spirits here. Then they will start to come closer. When they come in within my energy field, like when we merge energies, I'm able to see who they are. They'll either manifest what they look like or a storyline for me to see, or certain images, or symbolisms, like they could show me ladybugs, right? Or I will hear it, feel it. There are a lot of ways in which it comes in, and it's just kind of really opening up to the subtleties. Because the thing with mediumship, it's really about learning a language of subtleties. And not every mediumship reading is me seeing a spirit standing behind somebody in 3D, right? Or I call it 4D physical. I can see spirits in 4th dimension. So the person would look back and not see anything, but I can see them because they're showing themselves in a physical manner, but in a 4th dimension frequency. Most of the communication actually happens in 5D and higher. And again, it's subtleties. It's subtle differences. The more you learn mediumship, the more you can understand, because you're seeing, hearing, and feeling those subtle cues which get louder. Do you have stories about, in your mediumship, connecting with the other side, or receiving messages from the other side as a medium? I cannot, through your near-death experience. One story that's really neat, that's always really stuck with me is, this was something I always wondered as a kid. It's funny when you look back at some of the things you wondered as a kid, and you wonder why. As you become an adult, you're like, oh, that's why. Becoming a medium explains why I wondered this. But as a kid, I would always wonder, if someone falls out of a plane, do they die before they hit the ground? Or do they have to hit the ground and die? Like, would they have a heart attack and leap first, or do they have to smush, right? I had a spirit explain this to me one time in a reading, and they were hit by a car. So there are 2 of them, I'll tell you. The first one, this woman was driving, and she actually had a head-on collision with a semi. She was in a smaller car, and she hit the semi head-on. She showed me she slowed it down, that when her car was about an inch and a bit away from hitting the semi. So just before she said she left her body, she's like, I didn't stay in my body for the impact. In fact, most of the time people don't. When we see those really gruesome accidents or injuries, well, not injuries, but the accidents where the person dies but their body is very injured, they're not there for that. They actually are pulled out before. I've seen that a lot in readings too. I've had a lot of them confirm that. I had another one too that told me, he had run across the street to go get his dog. He ran and grabbed his dog, and then a car hit him. His memory was that he ran across the street and then kept running to get his dog, and then was like, I can't really get my dog. I can't pick up my dog. And was like, what? Then he turned around and realized he'd actually been hit by a car and he was on the ground. The transition from waking life to death. Spirit desires to help it be as seamless and with the least amount of pain possible. That doesn't mean it is always pain-free, but the majority of the time, when there's a massive injury or accident, the person was pulled out of their body before, or they don't have a recollection of the actual death part. Even when we see somebody in a hospital, I've seen people when they've been kind of in a coma or really near death, where they're no longer talking anymore. Their body may be making kind of moaning noises and they look like they're in pain. I've seen where the soul, like, if this is the body, the soul is actually hovering just above the body. So the soul is not in the body feeling that. That's a physical reaction that's happening. It actually brought a lot of comfort in understanding the process of dying, that it is meant to be as seamless as possible. That actual point of dying. I've also seen people when they've crossed over where, if they suffered a long illness before, like say they had cancer or something, and their suffering was such, the moment in which they pass is so beautiful, in which spirit is right there with them. Oftentimes they either just lift out of the body, or I've seen someone sit up out of their body, get up and just be like, and then cross into the light. So, we fear conversations of dying. I mean, I think we're getting better at it, but there's a lot of fear around the conversations of dying. But in truth, so much of it is supported by the spirit realm and by the soul and higher self of the person also. That is. And I'm grateful you shared those stories because, that's kind of the whole point of this channel, wanting to eliminate fears of death and help people who are really anxious about that. So thank you. I've really appreciated our time here together. Do you have any final advice for our viewers who are watching this right now? Yeah. The most significant thing that I've carried with me since my NDE is, again, the value of our human life. Even in the struggle and even in the tough times, in the loneliness and the grief and, all of that, there is such a value of every single human life in what they're learning and what they're acquiring as a soul. And I'm saying this as a general statement because I know there are outliers that we could debate, right? But generally, your life is so valuable to your soul and to the collective that the best thing you could do is try, honestly, to make the most of it. Do everything you desire to do. See everything you desire to see because the whole purpose of having a human lifetime is to experience. There's a huge value in coming to Earth and experiencing the depth of polarity that we have and the emotional capacity we have, plus this transformative time. And if we focus on living and creating the life that we want versus feeling stuck in the life that we are, we have the opportunity to gain so much soul knowledge that we carry with us on the other side. And that's such a part of why we're here, is to gain soul knowledge. So if you remember that, then you can make the most of what you're doing here. So that when you cross over with the satisfaction of, look what I did a lot. And that doing a lot doesn't mean you have to live till 99. I've talked to souls that were even children or teenagers or young adults that crossed over. But the amount that they took in their experience was significant. So no life is disregarded, and every life has value. And so it's really about living it to the fullest. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I guess my final question, can you tell me a bit more about your book and how people can maybe get in touch with you or follow you? Yeah, absolutely. So, my book details my whole surgery experience. It's called Avalon to Aurora, a medium's near-death experience. It's on Amazon, so it's easy to find, too. And then, if you are interested in what I do, AvalonSpirit.com is our landing page for everything, including the course offerings that we have. I teach courses on mediumship for people to open up their connection to spirit. And then as well as my podcast, the Ginette Biro podcast, which I do put on YouTube under Ginette Biro Medium. I do daily postings on YouTube as well. And then I also have Facebook and Instagram, which is Ginette Biro Medium too. So I'm on social media a lot, sharing tips and ideas, channeled messages, spirit messages, and even card readings, even though I don't use cards in my mediumship sessions or what I do. But Spirit was like, share messages through cards, because everyone takes something from the images too. So there's a lot that I do now because, again, I agreed to do that when I came back from my NDE. So awesome. Well, yes, I'm very grateful you did. This was an amazing conversation. So thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thank you so much for watching this video on T&H Afterlife. I really appreciate all of our amazing viewers and all the incredible comments that are left on our videos. If you like this video, here's another one that you might like to watch. And if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to T&H Afterlife. Thank you.